Welcome to the 20th and final presentation in our series on action learning. We're very pleased that you are joining us. This presentation is about suggested enhancements to action learning. I'm Carter McNamara of Authenticity Consulting. We're providing this series to make action learning even more available and more accessible to everyone. This presentation is one in a series and they are best viewed in order, so please be sure to visit the website listed below for more information on the complete series, as well as more information about our company. And so now, let's get started. Over the years, we've come up with various suggestions on how to improve action learning and how to make it even more accessible to more people. Of course, there are different opinions about the future of action learning, and those depend on the different perspectives on the process. So, the suggestions in this presentation are our own. We'd love to hear from others as well. In this presentation, we'll share some quick suggestions about how to expand the power and learning of action learning, how to make it easier for people to use, hopefully without losing the power of the process, and we'll share some suggestions to help more people to use it. And last, if you've been following along with us in this series, then we'll share some suggestions about how you might go forward with action learning. The action learning process is a broad framework that can be customized for many different applications. As such, it's common that practitioners quickly start thinking of new ideas for the process. Their preferred applications will influence how they react to our suggestions. And many practitioners have a certain school or a model of action learning that they prefer. We talked about that in an earlier presentation about different perspectives on action learning. Their preferred school or model will also influence how they react to our suggestions. And also, whether people agree with us depends on their preferred future for action learning. So, for example, do they especially prefer more power in learning for the process? Then they might agree with our suggestions in that category. Or do they especially prefer more people to be able to use the process? Or do they especially prefer action learning to be even easier to use? Then they'll appreciate our suggestions here too. Our first suggestion to expand action learning's power in learning is for action learning in the field of personal and professional coaching to borrow more from each other. Action learning was one of the first practices to really appreciate and emphasize the role of questions for actions and learning. The field of personal and professional coaching also uses questions as a primary tool. It's fair to say that coaching has exploded in popularity, probably because it can be widely accessible to many people and for many different applications. Coaching uses many different types of tools, and because of the popularity of coaching, these tools are increasingly popular as well. For example, tools for deep listening, questioning, problem solving, action planning, and reflection. I hope action learning and coaching can grow more from each other. Each has tremendous value and tools that they can share. Another suggestion is for action learning to learn even more from the latest research on learning. For example, new forms such as accelerated learning, adaptive learning, blended learning, holistic learning, and e-learning. Action learning literature already mentions continuous learning and self-directed learning, organizational learning, and then the loops of learning associated with systems tools. Another suggestion is to do an even better job of capturing and spreading the learning from action learning. This suggestion is one of our favorite because organizations sometimes see the learning as being associated primarily with the action learning program and therefore remaining as part of the program. But action learning generates deep and wide learning, so it should be captured and spread much more across organizations and communities. Another suggestion is to borrow from the field or the movement of appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry has burst onto the scene as a very powerful perspective for effective personal, professional, and organizational development. A primary principle of the field is that many times in life what we call a problem or see as being stuck in a problem can actually make the problem seem much worse. Research shows that if instead we see those situations as opportunities or even just as neutral priorities, we are often much more effective in addressing them. Appreciative inquiry uses methods and tools that build on our strengths, assets, visions, hopes, and stories to take advantage of our opportunities. The first suggestion to make action learning even easier to use is to focus a bit more on the practicalities of how to do action learning and a bit less on the theories. Action learning is a straightforward yet very powerful process that encompasses many aspects of otherwise complex subjects such as problem solving and group dynamics, reflection, and learning. Thus, the process is open to a wide variety of theories about each of these aspects. While researchers, educators, and writers appreciate the theories, those new to action learning might be scared off a bit. And that leads us to the next suggestion, to provide more straightforward tools and templates. We sometimes hear people comment that much of the information about action learning seems rather abstract and theoretical. They often react that action learning seems highly complex and even has a certain mystique about it, making it that much harder to do. Yet, after they've actually done several action learning groups, they often comment on how much more comfortable they are with the process. So perhaps more straightforward tools and templates would help them feel much more comfortable even faster? Another suggestion is to polish the tools for virtual action learning. New technologies from the World Wide Web have made problem solving and learning much more accessible to many more people and for far less money. Those technologies should be incorporated much more into action learning. For example, tools for online collaboration and learning. And another suggestion is to help schools to support self-directed learning, the very type of learning that is the hallmark of action learning. This suggestion might seem a bit contradictory to the purpose of schooling. However, one of the biggest misconceptions is that learning occurs only when we get a good grade from a teacher. We come out of school with many years of working from this perspective. Yet, we've learned that the best forms of learning are usually self-directed. That is, we've taken ownership of our learning for ourselves. The first suggestion to help more people use action learning is to acculturate the process a bit more so more cultures can use it. Action learning is based primarily on the use of questions. Yet some cultures do not appreciate questions and even see them as being a bit disrespectful. And some practitioners have learned to modify the process to suit these cultures. For example, by integrating the use of stories rather than extensive questions. The world is a very diverse place. Let's modify the process even more for various different cultures so that more people can use it. Another suggestion is to help spawn even more self-facilitated groups. The founder of Action Learning, Reginald Revens, warned against what he called packaging of action learning into various proprietary models that required external facilitators. Concurrently, he strongly asserted that action learning is most powerful when all the participants share in developing and facilitating programs. Hopefully, we will listen more to his advice. Another suggestion is to consider action learning not only as a series of meetings in a program, but sometimes as a one-time event. Even Revens, the founder of Action Learning, mentioned that much more learning and progress can be made even when people come together once to really focus and help each other learn, primarily by asking questions to decide what actions to do. The key point, though, is that they have to do those actions and then reflect on the results. Literature about action learning usually lists similar outcomes and applications, so this last suggestion is to expand that list even more. For example, action learning is a great way to ensure that people are accountable to take actions. Thus, it's great for ensuring that plans are implemented. Also, action learning is a great way for people to quickly bond with each other and support each other. So action learning could even be used in support groups? Certainly, action learning is great for teaching coaching skills, so it should be considered for that as well. And also, action learning can be a very powerful tool to ensure that students actually apply the content from training programs, because they hold each other accountable to apply that content and to learn at the same time. So, what are your ideas? This is the last presentation in the series about action learning process and programs. If you've been following along with us, then you've probably gathered many ideas about how to start or improve your own application of action learning. One of the themes throughout this series is that action learning requires an equal commitment to actions and to learn. So, in the spirit of action learning, what are your actions from this series? Will you see other videos about action learning and also about coaching? During each video, ask yourself, what type of action learning program am I seeing? Single project or multi-project? What kind of coaching format or model might I be seeing? Remember that you're probably seeing one session and that a program includes many sessions. Will you read a book or two on the topics of action learning and coaching? The resources described at the end of each presentation pointed you to a list of suggested books about both topics. With each book, again ask yourself, what type of program or model is this book about? You might pair with a friend or coworker and practice coaching by having each of you briefly describe a current real priority and then getting useful questions to clarify the priority and to identify actions to address it. You might meet again in several weeks and repeat the process. Always be asking, what new knowledge, skills, and abilities am I getting so far? You might find or form a discussion group about the action learning process or even about developing programs. We hope that after finishing this series, you'll even design your group to include ongoing actions among your members and to learn at the same time. The best way to learn this process is by doing it. We hope that as part of your learning, you'll share your feedback with us. We'll likely in turn share it with others, as we're doing with this series. Thank you for viewing our presentations. You might benefit from the following resources to add even more detail to our overviews of action learning. The website Action Learning Central references an extensive amount of free resources, including about the action learning process, each of its key elements, examples of action learning programs, and tools for each aspect of action learning. There's even an action learning glossary with definitions for each of the common terms in action learning. Our company, Authenticity Consulting, also is available to answer your questions or to help you in any other way. Our firm does very successful action learning groups around the world and for a wide variety of outcomes and applications. There's also the free management library at managementhelp.org. You can find resources and tools for almost any activity in the workplace, including for many of the activities in action learning. You can find more about each of these three resources by going to actionlearningcentral.com/gratis and select the presentation entitled General Resources for Action Learning. Thank you.